Welcome to the Genshin Impact Beginner's Guide. This video is intended for new or returning players starting a new account after the version 2.0 update, which was released on July 21st, 2021. The goal of this video is to provide a step-by-step guide for getting started, an overview of the gameplay and gacha mechanics, and a roadmap for what kind of content to prioritize as you play through the game. I will also go over 3 basic playing styles, casual, committed, and min-max, and discuss what to expect from each way of playing, as well as whether you should consider spending real-world money based on the way you want to play. First of all, what is Genshin Impact? You may have seen it described as an anime game, an open-world action RPG, a gacha game, a mobile game, or any number of other vague qualifiers. Unfortunately, it's not a game that you can slap a simple label on, as it incorporates different aspects from several genres. At its core, Genshin Impact is a live service game with new content every few weeks, including time-limited characters, weapons, and events. The gameplay itself is primarily action RPG, with story quests, overworld puzzles, dungeons, and bosses a la Breath of the Wild or The Witcher 3. There's also a gacha element present both in the form of semi-randomized loot box-esque character and item acquisition, as well as a stamina resource that is required to access certain parts of the game and replenishes over real-world time. If you're not familiar with the concept of gacha games, the term comes from gachapon vending machines that are popular in Japan and dispense collectible toys or figures with differing rarities, encouraging collection of complete sets. Gacha games generally follow a similar formula. They are usually free to play, they gate your progress behind real-world time or money, and there are loot box systems that allow for and encourage unlimited spending to continue to unlock more and more rare content. I am by no means a gacha game expert, but I have played several popular gacha games in the past. While Genshin Impact still uses the predatory, psychologically, and emotionally manipulative tactics that other gacha games do, what I can say in its favor is that no matter how little you have spent, you can always play the core game. That's a step up over several other gacha games which require limited resources just to play at all. Additionally, with each new content patch, there is more and more free content added to the game, and if Genshin Impact follows the trend of many other popular gacha games, resources will continue to become more plentiful and available as time goes on. The most important thing to keep in mind with respect to the gacha nature of Genshin Impact is that this game is a marathon, not a sprint. I'll go more in depth when I talk about the ways to play in part 4 of this video, but this isn't the kind of game you can play for a week or two and then put down. It rewards you the most for playing anywhere from 15 minutes to an hour each day, and setting aside a few hours at a time to clear story quests and explore the world. With that being said, let's jump into the step-by-step guide for getting started. I generally don't want to be too prescriptive in telling people how to play the game, but the beginning is an exception. There are a few pitfalls you need to avoid in the beginning of the game. You're given a lot of resources right away, and you can set yourself behind if you spend them the wrong way. Because of that, I recommend following this guide pretty closely. Once you get through most of the tutorials and have unlocked the free characters, you're free to play in any way that you want, and we'll discuss that in more detail in part 4. The first thing you'll need to do is download and install the game and make an account. I'm only going to go over the steps for downloading on PC here, but playing on mobile or PlayStation is fairly straightforward. Just make sure that if you want to play across multiple systems that you register via email with a miHoYo account. To download the game, go to genshin.mihoyo.com/en/download, which is linked in the description, and click on the Windows button to download the installer. After installing, open the launcher. The game should download, and you can launch to the menu screen. From here, you can make a miHoYo account with an email address. Enter your email, and then before entering anything else, select Send Code. It should send a registration code to the email entered in the field above. After entering the code and creating a password, confirm the terms of service, pass the CAPTCHA, and then you can register. Once you load in, the game will launch you immediately into the opening cutscene. After a brief moment of action, you'll be asked to choose a twin. This has no effect on story or gameplay, but you can't change after you make your choice, so choose wisely. Next, you'll enter your name. This is the name that will appear as the name of the main character in menus and story text, as well as the name that appears to other players. You can change this name later if you want to. After some more cinematics, you'll finally gain control of your character on the beach with the instructions to follow Paimon. The tutorial will hold your hand through most of the basic controls, jumping, sprinting, combat, etc. I'll also throw in a few tips for your own efficiency. The fastest and most stamina efficient way of traveling is repeated dashing, not sprinting. Another nice trick is to scroll up and down through items when picking up multiples. This speeds up the rate at which you can pick them up. You'll notice yourself receiving different kinds of experience and items throughout the tutorials. We'll get to this a bit later on in part 3. For now, our goal is to get through the initial tutorials as efficiently as possible. After a few more cinematics, we meet Amber. Amber is one of the free characters accessible to all players, and she's automatically added to your party. This introduces one of the core mechanics of the game, which is character swapping. You can freely swap between any of the 4 characters in your party, even in combat, and combining characters of different weapon types, elements, and abilities is one of the biggest strategic appeals of the game. The more characters you unlock, the more possible combinations there are. We'll go over elemental resonance and party composition more in depth in part 3. Amber is permanently available as a playable character, but she's only canonically with you until you reach Mondstadt. This is a trend that you'll see with other characters as well. You'll only spend 1 or 2 quests with them in the story, sometimes even less, but if you manage to unlock them, you can use them at any time. Continue to follow the quests and tutorials that pop up through Mondstadt. Feel free to stop off to activate any teleportation waypoints or open any chests that you see. Don't spend any resources upgrading weapons, artifacts, or characters. You should be plenty strong enough to do the next portion of content at the base level. Talking to Amber unlocks the Wind Glider, which is exceedingly important.
Oh, you're really excited about these wind gliders, huh?
Reaching Adventure Rank 5 unlocks the Shop and Wish features. We'll talk about wishing for new characters more in part 3, but for now you'll just want to continue the prologue quest. Meet Kaya, Lisa, and Amber at their respective temples, and add Kaya and Lisa to your party, making sure to open any treasure chests you find and activate any waypoints along the way. You'll also want to collect any animalculi you encounter. They appear on your minimap as stars and will be important later on. After completing the quests in all 3 of the temples, you should have reached AR7. Head back to Mondstadt and talk to Catherine at the Adventurers Guild to unlock the Adventurer's Handbook. Claim the quests in Chapter 1 of the Handbook, and then proceed with Kaya's story quest, Secret Pirate Treasure. After reaching AR8, you should be able to navigate to Amber's story quest, Wind, Courage, and Wings. If you are having trouble with combat in either of these quest lines, try equipping the Traveler's Handy Sword you received earlier to Kaya and equipping him with the highest level artifacts you've found. If you're running low on health in the overworld, you can always teleport to a statue of the 7 to heal, and while you're there, change the default setting from 50 to 100% so it heals you fully every time you're nearby. After completing Kaya and Amber's story quests, turn in any animalculi you've collected to a statue of the 7, claim any remaining handbook missions, and if need be, you can open some hidden treasure chests around Mondstadt, like this one in the plaza and this one on the roof of the church. With all this, you should have finally reached AR10. Open your mailbox from the menu and claim the rewards that are there. As of this recording, new accounts should receive both the 3 and 10 million pre-registration bonuses, which should include 20 of this item right here, a Quaint Fate. There's one final step that I recommend you do before you take off on your own adventure, but we'll come back to that once I've explained more about the game. For now, we're moving on to part 3, gameplay and gacha mechanics. One of the common features of gacha games are complex, interwoven resource systems that are complicated to figure out, and Genshin Impact is no exception. In the first section of part 3, I'll be going over the different experience systems and the different resources for in-game purposes, and then I'll go over the gacha resources and how they connect to gameplay. I'll also make recommendations for how to spend the gacha resources given to you at the beginning of the game. After that, I'll talk about how you can efficiently invest your resources without running out, and finally, I'll talk about party composition and how to take advantage of the elements. So first things first, experience or EXP. The primary experience system is Adventure EXP, which determines your adventure rank, or AR. This is the player's level, not to be confused with the player character, but rather the level that you are. AR governs monster levels and is a prerequisite for quests and dungeons. There are also several features that unlock once you reach a minimum AR, such as the Battle Pass, which grants extra rewards every month, and the Spiral Abyss, which is the endgame dungeon that resets every 2 weeks. You gain Adventure EXP primarily by completing quests, but you can also get it from opening chests, defeating bosses, and clearing dungeons. Almost everything in the game is gated by adventure rank, so one of your main goals while playing should be to increase your adventure rank whenever possible. The second experience system is Character EXP. This is unique to each character and governs their base stats. There are 2 main
Come a
ways of
little
gaining character
closer.
EXP. You
Blitz.
get a small amount from defeating monsters, or you can level up using materials from the character screen. There are also a few quests that give character EXP. When leveling up, your character is capped at levels 20, 40, 50, 60, 70, and 80, and the max character level is 90. The level cap requires special Ascension materials to surpass, which we'll talk about in a moment, but it also has a minimum AR requirement as well. There are 2 vitally important parts with regards to character EXP. The first is that you can overlevel using rare materials. The most valuable material, Hero's Wit, gives 20,000 EXP to the character you use it on. However, if that character is only 100 EXP away from the level cap, 19,000 EXP will be wasted. Because of this, I tend to stop just before the cap and fight mobs in the overworld to get my characters up to the level cap. The second important point is that character EXP materials are one of the easiest materials to run out of. They are not particularly rare, and there is always a constant source of EXP in the overworld, but many players overinvest their resources across too many characters early on and end up struggling against harder content while they try to dig themselves out of the hole that they made. I'll go over it in a little more depth in the character building section, but be very judicious with how you spend your character EXP materials. As a quick aside, there is another EXP system for characters called Companionship EXP. This is gained primarily from completing quests and unlocks voice lines and profile backgrounds, but has no effect on gameplay. There are two other unique experience systems, one for weapons and one for artifacts. Weapons have level caps at 20, 40, 50, etc., just like characters, and also require special ascension materials and have a minimum AR requirement to surpass the level cap. You can enhance weapons from the character or inventory screen, and you use other weapons as fodder for experience or enhancement ore, which can be refined at a blacksmith. You can also refine weapons by using weapons of the same type, which increases the numbers on their secondary abilities. Unlike character EXP, excess weapon EXP is returned to you in the form of enhancement ore. You also don't need to be quite as careful spending weapon EXP materials as you do using character materials, but they are still relatively scarce and it's easy to run out if you waste them. I recommend only upgrading one weapon per character. Artifacts are enhanced using other artifacts, or with rare materials called Sanctifying Unction or Essence, which you won't run into until much later in the game. Artifacts that have been enhanced can then later be used to enhance other artifacts at only a slight overall loss in EXP, so it's generally safe to enhance artifacts that you're using while playing through the game. Artifacts also don't have the same level progression as weapons and characters. Instead, they have a single level cap, which is determined by artifact rank. Artifacts aren't super important for the early part of the game, but they are complex enough to warrant their own video once you reach the late game. For now, just equip and enhance whatever artifacts you have that look like they have stats that help your characters. Now, onto resources. The primary in-game resource is called Mora, and functions both as a spendable currency and as a resource for crafting. It is used to purchase items from shops and vendors, but also as a requirement for leveling up characters, weapons, and artifacts, as well as being required for alchemy, the process by which you can combine common items into their rarer versions. The game describes Mora as a catalyst for any transaction, and that ends up being pretty accurate. Mora is obtained as a reward for basically everything, from fighting monsters to quest rewards to notices from the developers that events are ending. Despite its relative abundance, many players find themselves running out, especially in the later portion of the game. You can't really get around the need for it, so just farm it when you can and be aware that you might run out if you try to upgrade too many things at once. Besides Mora and EXP materials, which we've already talked about, characters and weapons also have ascension material requirements to pass level caps. For characters, they require gemstone fragments, which are found as boss rewards, unique boss materials, also boss rewards, a local specialty, which is a material found in the wild that is unique to the character's home region, and a common mob drop. The rarity of required materials goes up as the character's level goes up. These resources are generally all farmable at any given time. Weapons are slightly different and require weapon ascension materials, which can only be farmed from dungeons on specific days of the real world week, in addition to different kinds of common mob drops. In addition to level ascension, once your characters are a high enough level, you can start to level up their talents. Each character has a basic attacking talent, an elemental skill, and an elemental burst. These can be leveled up using the talent level up materials, which are also found in weekly dungeons, common mob drops, and eventually they'll require weekly boss materials, which drop from enemies you can only fight once per week. The rest of the materials in the game are generally for cooking, building, or quest items, and are relatively self-explanatory or unimportant to the core gameplay. The final in-game resource is called resin, and functions similar to stamina in other gacha games. It replenishes slowly over time at 1 resin per 8 minutes, and is currently capped at 160 total. Resin bridges the gap between the gacha or paid resources and the in-game resources, as you can replenish resin using premium currency. It is required to get the rewards from beating overworld bosses, weekly bosses, and dungeons. This means that character ascension, weapon ascension, talent ascension, and farming for new artifacts are all restricted by real world time. Because it caps at 160, that means you can only store about 21 hours worth at one time. Not capping on resin is one of the primary motivations players have to play daily. It also is one of the most controversial aspects of the game, as running out of resin can put a hard stop on your progression. Stamina restriction is one of the most common techniques used by developers of gacha games to retain players early in the game's life, since it artificially inflates the amount of time it takes to progress through content. There have already been multiple improvements to the resin system since Genshin Impact's release, so it seems likely that these rates will continue to improve as the game matures. So those are the in-game systems, a bit complex, but still within the realm of normalcy for an RPG. Now we move on to the gacha resources and mechanics. This is so convoluted and dense that it will likely warrant its own video in the future, but I'll do the brief version here, as well as going over how you should spend your new player rewards, and also showing you the drops that I got on the account I created for this video. So the primary premium currency is called Primo Gems. That should be easy to remember because the name literally has Primo in it. I've already talked about how Primogems can be used to replenish resin, and while this is true, I've never found it to be a good use of Primogems. I tend to be a rather patient player, so you might have a different experience, but this has always seemed to me to be something reserved for players with very deep pockets who aren't willing to wait a day or two to level up their characters. Your characters are trapped in the computer, they aren't going anywhere. The primary purpose of Primogems is to buy loot boxes, or in Genshin Impact terms, to wish for new weapons and characters. The Wish menu has these pages called banners, some of which are limited time and some of which are permanent. You can think of each banner as its own vending machine, or gachapon, with its own pool of items you can randomly get. Wishing uses a resource called Fates, which you can buy with Primogems from the shop at 160 each. There are two kinds of fates, acquaint fates and intertwine fates. Acquaint fates are blue and can be used on permanent banners only. They are also sometimes given as rewards in-game, most notably from the free
Ad
portion of
Astra
the Battle Pass.
Exhaust.
The combination of being earnable as a non-paying player and only being usable on the permanent banner means that in my opinion you should never buy Acquaint Fates with Primogems. Your experience may vary, but I only use the Acquaint Fates the game gives me as rewards to wish on this banner. Intertwined fates are the blue and pink fates, and are usable on the limited banners, which includes the character banner and the weapon banner. Limited banners generally have better odds for specific characters or weapons in exchange for only being available for a few weeks. In my opinion, you should save your Primo Gems to buy Intertwined Fates only and use them to wish on limited banners that have characters that you like. In addition to Fates, there are a few other kinds of weird currencies in the Gacha system. The first two are called Masterless Stardust and Masterless Starglitter. These are basically resources that are essentially just runoff from wishing. Whenever you make a wish on a banner, you'll get some amount of Stardust or Starglitter. From the shop, you can use Stardust to buy 5 each of Acquaint or Intertwined Fate once per calendar month. You can also exchange Starglitter an unlimited number of times for fates of both kinds, as well as a monthly rotation of characters and weapons. The ability to buy fates, good weapons, and characters makes this shop seem great, but unfortunately you are completely at the mercy of the gacha system when it comes to stockpiling Star Glitter. My recommendation is to hoard it until there's something in the shop that you really want, or until you need just a few more wishes on a banner to reach the pity counter. Speaking of pity, this warrants an entire video of its own, but each banner has a pity system. Essentially, what that means is that it's impossible to get too unlucky. After a certain number of wishes, you're eventually guaranteed to get the promoted character or weapon. Don't be tricked into thinking that this guarantee makes up for the low odds, however. To guarantee getting a specific character, you could end up spending hundreds and sometimes thousands of dollars. There is one other currency in the shop called Genesis Crystals. You can buy Genesis Crystals directly with real money, but outside of character outfits, of which there are currently only two, there's no use for Genesis Crystals except to convert them one to one into Primogems. This is the primary way that you would be spending money on the game. The last thing to mention is something called a Stella Fortuna. If you receive a character that you already own from the Wish system, instead you get that character's Stella Fortuna, which allows you to activate their constellations from the character screen. Constellations are powerful abilities that sometimes completely change the way a character plays, so it makes pulling multiples of the same character generally a good thing. Okay, so we've gone over in-game resources as well as the gacha resources. So the next step is to show you how the gacha resources actually work in action. The first banner is the beginner banner, which is available to new players only. It lets you do 2 sets of 10 wishes for only 8 fates each, and guarantees that you get Noelle, who is the only free Claymore user. This is why we got all the way to AR10 before wishing. This way we can take advantage of the beginner deal right away using the fates that we got from the pre-registration rewards. During my wishes, I also got Barbara, who is a free character, but you don't get her until later on, so it might be nice to have a Hydro character right away. It's also not a complete waste because now when she joins the party, we'll get a constellation. If you want to take your time wishing, you can stop here. Noelle is pretty vital as a Claymore user, and even though it isn't specifically disclosed, I have my suspicions that drop rates are vastly increased on the beginner banner to try and hook new players. If you're happy with the free characters that you got, you can go back to the game and get to playing. However, my recommendation is to go ahead and spend what you already have. One of the big appeals of this game is the ability to use characters that you like, especially on story content, and you can't play with characters you haven't unlocked yet. In my case, I had enough Stardust to buy 3 more Acquaint Fates, bringing my total up to 9. Since you're only guaranteed a 4-star character or weapon in every 10 wishes, I used Primo Gems to purchase Intertwined Fates and wish on the limited banner until I had enough Stardust to buy the 10th Acquaint Fate. And then, huh, that was pretty lucky. Not only did I get a 5-star character in my first 10 wishes, which is a 0.6% chance, it also happens to be one of the strongest characters in the game. I can only hope that watching this video transmits some of my throwaway account luck to you, but no guarantees. Although this reminds me, if you burn through all of your initial wishes and you're not happy with the results, you can always start a new account and play through the intro again to re-roll your free wishes. People did this a lot when the game first came out because there were limited time rewards for new players back then, but it's not the craziest thing to do even now. And if there's a character that you particularly want but you aren't willing to spend money, the time investment could be worth it to you. The gacha system is needlessly complex in order to obfuscate the real life value of in game items, but this shouldn't be too much of a surprise to anyone who's played a game with microtransactions in the last 10 years. My recommendation would be to learn about the drop rates and probabilities so you can make fully informed purchases, and play the game for a few weeks to see if you're really willing to commit the kind of time it takes to justify spending money on digital characters. Speaking of playing the game, let's move on to the party building portion of the video. This isn't going to be a super hardcore theory crafting analysis. There are plenty of resources for that online already. Instead, I just want to point out a few things that the game doesn't make clear to you that should save you some headaches as you play through the story content and explore the world. First of all, from the party selection screen, check out the Elemental Resonance menu in the top right. Having certain combinations of characters gives you different
Leave it
boons
to me.
depending on which ones you have. This can help you decide who to bring and who to leave behind when you're building your party. Second, there are a few things I would categorize as requirements for general exploration. You can use whoever you want for battles and dungeons, but for the overworld, it's very important to have at least one bow user, at least one pyro user, and at least one way to deal damage to rocks and shields, the easiest of which is a claymore user. While a claymore user is technically not necessary because you can break rocks with diving attacks or overload reactions, it will save you a lot of time to just use a claymore. Characters with healing abilities, Barbara and Noelle being the free ones, are not strictly required, but they can save you a lot of food and trips back and forth to Statues of the Seven. I also recommend a tall character. Kaya and Lisa are the free ones. Tall characters run and climb faster and can jump farther than shorter characters. It can also be convenient to have a character of the element that corresponds to the region you are in as you explore. Most obviously, that would be the Traveler, as they can resonate with the element of the region, especially in Liwa, because there are many puzzles that require a geo-construct to solve. While all of those are nice to have, a bow and pyro user are non-negotiable. There are a ton of puzzles in all of the regions that require either a bow or pyro element to solve, and there are many enemies, most notably ruin guards like the one that you fight at the end of Kai's story quest, that are considerably more difficult without the ability to aim ranged attacks. Finally, you'll want to consider elemental coverage. Pyro is necessary for a ton of puzzles and provides you great offense against cryo and dendro enemies. It's weakest against pyro enemies, so it's best to pair it with something strong against pyro, like hydro. Cryo or electro also work if you don't have a hydro unit. If you find yourself struggling against certain types of enemies, don't be afraid to switch up your party. That brings us to the character building portion of the video. This isn't about theory crafting optimal builds, but rather how you should designate your resources as you play through the game. If you try to level up all 4 characters in your party, you're likely to run out of materials very quickly. The general consensus is to designate one character as your main DPS character. This can be any character that you want, although some are better at it than others. I recommend you choose a character that you like playing as that also does a healthy mix of physical and elemental damage. The Traveler is a very safe choice as they will likely always be relevant as more content is released. Ling is another popular choice as she's available for free once you reach the required adventure rank. If you roll a powerful 5-star character like I did, that's always a great investment, as a 5-star character can reach greater maximum stats than 4-star characters. If I continue to play on this account, I'll definitely level up Diluc. After your main DPS, it's usually okay to level up one other character. This would usually be a complementary character to your main DPS, who will not spend as much time on the field, but who you'll switch in frequently to use their elemental skill and burst. Xiangling and Kaya are both very popular free choices for this sub DPS role, but you can choose whoever your heart desires. The other 2 characters in your party should get minimal EXP investment unless you feel you really need it to progress through content. These should be characters whose basic purpose is to provide a specific element for reactions or to use their elemental burst for utility. They will get EXP from story quests and fighting enemies, and it's definitely worth ascending them if they hit the level cap, but they would be considered full supports and should be last in line to get resources until you're further in the game and have a handle on how many EXP books you can reasonably afford to spend. Given all of this, the party I would probably build on this new account is Diluc as the primary DPS, Kaya as the secondary or sub DPS, and Amber and Barbara as the support/exploration helpers. Diluc provides Pyro and Claymore, and is also a tall character for faster movement. Amber is the bow user for exploration and certain enemies such as rune guards, and also provides Pyro Resonance, which increases the party's attack by 25%. And then Kaya's elemental skill is very powerful and has a short cooldown. It also synergizes well with Diluc to create melt reactions, which have some of the best damage amplification in the game. You might build your party completely differently, however. The possibilities are endless, which is one of the greatest appeals of this game. Just be careful with how you invest your resources, or you can put yourself in a several-day hole trying to farm back up what you've spent. This is the final section of the video, and the goal is to give you a list of priorities during different stages of the game. You can certainly play however you want, but if you want to be efficient, this is your guide. I'll also be discussing what I see as the 3 basic ways to engage with the game, and whether I recommend you spend real money based on how you want to play. The first priority when you launch Genshin Impact for the first time should be to unlock the basic game systems as soon as possible, and the best way to do that is to follow my walkthrough from earlier in the video. This portion of the game ends around AR 10 after you've made your first wishes and unlocked the initial free crew of Amber, Kaya, Lisa, and Noelle. From there, I recommend finishing the prologue quests with the characters that you want to continue using. This quest line provides an enormous amount of character EXP for free and will bring the characters that participate close to the level cap. It also helps with your next priority, which is reaching Adventure Rank 12. At AR 12, you unlock daily commissions, which are 4 easy quests that you're assigned every day that provide Primogems and AR EXP. Once you finish the 4 quests each day, also remember to check in with Catherine at the Adventurers Guild to receive more rewards. After the rush to AR 12, you're at cruising altitude for a while. If you can, you want to make sure to complete your daily commissions every day as well as spend your resin. There are not a ton of good ways to spend resin this early in the game, so I recommend just finding an overworld boss that you can beat and fighting it 3 or 4 times a day. The other option is to track down ley lines, which reward Mora or EXP materials and are pretty easy to beat. Other than that, feel free to complete story quests, do limited time events, and explore the wild as you see fit. It's also worth prioritizing unlocking teleport waypoints and tracking down Oculi to raise your stamina. Eventually, you'll reach AR25 and unlock City Reputation, which can give you the ability to craft an item called Condensed Resin, which lets you double the speed at which you use resin, so be on the lookout for that. Completing some of the main quests also eventually unlock boss fights that you can do once per week that give great rewards. The final stage of the game starts around AR45, when you can finally challenge the hardest dungeons, or domains as they're called in the game. At that point, you can shift gears towards maxing out your strongest characters and weapons and farming for the best artifacts. Simplified like this, it doesn't seem like much, but I would estimate this is about 6 months worth of serious playtime just to get to this point. Less if you're willing to play a ton and slash or spend real money to speed up your progression. To help you decide if that's something that you want to do, I'm going to outline the 3 basic playstyles and talk about the goals for each one, as well as whether I think you should consider spending. The first playstyle is casual. This would be someone who isn't willing or able to dedicate time to the game but is interested in playing nonetheless. Someone playing casually would be unlikely to log in every day, so doing daily commissions or spending resin isn't always possible. Because of this, they would probably start to fall behind the curve of the game and always feel low on resources. They also might have trouble playing story content right away, as they'd have to catch up in adventure rank to unlock new events or quests. You would think that I would say someone playing this way should absolutely not spend any money. And while I think it would be best not to, I actually think it would be okay for a player like this to spend a little bit here and there, provided that they are making one time purchases. One way to feel like you're getting more out of the game without putting more time in is to just play with characters that you really like, and that might involve spending a little bit right at the beginning. Overall, though, if you know this is how you would play, I would warn you that it might sour your experience overall. The next playstyle I'm calling committed. This is someone who's willing to at least try to log in every day. If they miss a day here and there, it's not the end of the world for them, but they are in it for the long haul. I think this is the ideal way to play because there's no stress if you fall off the rails for a bit, but you can still keep up with new content as it's released. I think someone playing this way would actually benefit the most from spending money because they can make up for some of the time they miss with premium currency. The ideal spending for a player like this is to buy the Battle Pass and the Welkin Moon Pass each month. The Battle Pass provides amazing rewards and is easy to finish if you put in any effort at all, and you don't have to buy it until you've fully completed it and you know you'll get all the rewards. And the Welkin Moon Pass is a one-time purchase that gives you Primo Gems every day as long as you log in for 30 consecutive days. You can absolutely get full enjoyment out of the game with this amount of spending and playing, and it gives you some wiggle room if you need to take breaks here and there. You can also play this way and not spend anything at all and still have a great time. So this is the way that I recommend. The final playstyle I'll go over is the min-maxer. This is someone who is willing to log in every day, fully complete every single quest and collection, farm renewable resources daily, and put in hours of effort for those final 50 Primo Gems from the endgame dungeons. This is actually the ideal free-to-play playstyle, because the game becomes less about the experience and more about the challenge of squeezing every ounce of value that you can out of a free account. I was a free to play min maxer for the first 6 months after I started playing, and I took a lot of pride in being able to beat difficult content without spending any money. However, I realized that I was spending about 95% of my time doing daily tasks and farming with characters that I didn't particularly enjoy using. I scaled back the amount of time I spent playing and decided to make up for that lost efficiency by being willing to spend for characters that I liked, and it increased my enjoyment of the game considerably. Now that there is new content out after a long drought, I'm able to take my time and use a unique team of characters that I put together myself to play through it. I do want to emphasize that gacha games are predatory and people who are susceptible to this kind of manipulation are at risk playing this game. However, with the right mindset, there is a ton of enjoyment and playtime to get out of this game without spending a cent. So, that's the Genshin Impact Beginner's Guide. I purposefully avoided going too in depth about basic mechanics because the game generally does a decent job of explaining them. But if you're confused about something, feel free to ask it in the comments below. I'm also planning to make a more in depth video about the pity system for wishing, as well as a video that goes more in depth on artifacts and how to farm them. If you'd like to be notified when those videos come out, please feel free to subscribe to the channel. Otherwise, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for watching.